Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear council members, dear guests. I'm very pleased to announce this session after a long break. We are another doctoral thesis we are discussing, and I would like, with your permission, to declare open a session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of thesis by Krasnov Fedor Krasnov for the degree of Doctor of Science in Informatics, Specialty 051301, System Analysis, Management and Information Processing, Technical Sciences, on the theme, Methodology of built-in a digital twin of a scientific and technical center in the oil and gas industry. I would like to invite all the council members while our session has been recorded, so please stay visible. So if for some reason you have to leave the room, please let me know and I shall announce a technical break. The order, St. Petersburg University, 30th of July 2020, 6966-1, me, Bogdan Alexander Vladimirovich, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor, Department of Space Technologies and Applied Astrodynamics at St. Petersburg University, was appointed Chairman of this Dissertation Council. Other members of the Dissertation Council were appointed with the same order, and let me introduce them to you. Uteshev Alexey Yuryevich, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor of the Department of Medical and Biological System Management of St. Petersburg University. Alexandrov Alexander Yuryevich, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor, Head of Department of Medical and Biological Systems Management of St. Petersburg University. In the remote access mode we have Andrianov Sergei Nikolaevich, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Computer Modeling and Multiprocessor Systems of St. Petersburg University. Can you see and hear us, Sergei Nikolaevich? Yes, thank you. Korenkov Vladimir Vasilovich, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Director of the Information Technology Laboratory of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you. Klementov Alexey Anatolyevich, Doctor of Physical Mathematical Sciences, European Organization for Nuclear Research, Switzerland. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you very well. Thank you. Also, the degree applicant, Krasnov Fedor Vladimirovich, is present. The academic consultant of the applicant, Dr. Alexander Borisovich, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Computer Modeling and Multiprocessor Systems of St. Petersburg University. To improve quality of communication, dear colleagues working in the remote access mode, please remember to switch off your microphones, but please remember to turn them on when you're given the floor. Also, I would like to inform you that our meeting is being recorded, audio and video recorded, and broadcast online at St. Petersburg University website. The speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English or from English into Russian. During the live broadcast of the Dissertation Council session, an email is currently displayed to which all the listeners may send their opinions and send questions to the degree applicant online regarding his thesis and the current scientific discussion of his speech. These questions shall be forwarded to me by our technical support department, and I shall read them during our discussion. Questions should be related strictly to the applicant's speech and the content of his thesis, and it's necessary to indicate full name, position, and place of employment of the author. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion, the discussion of the thesis, text, and assessment of the thesis shall not be presented. In accordance with the order of awarding at St. Petersburg University academic degrees of Candidate of Sciences approved by the local regulations of St. Petersburg University, a session of the Dissertation Council shall be considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved council members are present, but not less than 4 persons. Our dissertation council consists of 6 members. All 6 are present, including 3 council members in remote interactive mode. Audio-visual contact has been established with all the council members. Thus, we have the quorum. Let me set forth the following procedure of today's session. First, summary report of the chairman on documents submitted by the degree applicant and their compliance with the applicable regulations, answers to possible questions. Approximately 5 minutes. Summary report of the chairman or the applicant outlining the key findings of his study. Approximately 20 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly on his report, not more than 2 minutes per question. Answers of the applicant, not more than 10 minutes for all questions. Speeches of all council members in turn with their assessment of the thesis and the applicant's speech with summary of their positions, questions and suggestions to the degree applicant. Approximately 10 minutes for each speaker. Speech of the chairman with his assessment of the thesis. Approximately 10 minutes. Answers of the degree applicant to questions and remarks of the dissertation council members, not more than 20 minutes. Open discussion. Speeches of the attendees with summaries of their positions and or specific questions and suggestions to the degree applicant. Strictly on the theme of the study, not more than 2 minutes for each speaker. At that, all the speakers are kindly requested to register in the registration sheet and introduce themselves fully before speaking. Chairman shall present questions to the applicant sent during the discussion of his speech and the scientific discussion during the live broadcast of a council session live at the Petersburg University website. Answers of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes per each question. Speech of the academic consultant. Discussion by the council members before open voting of the results. For that period, sound shall be switched off. Approximately 5 minutes. Open individual voting. Votes shall be counted by the chairman and the results shall be recorded in the minute of the meeting. Decision on awarding or non-awarding academic degree and closing remarks of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to this procedure? I see there are no objections. Then let us start. First, let us start with the chairman's report. A thesis by Krasnov for the degree of Doctor in Informatics, specialty 05-1301, System Analysis, Management, Information Processing, Technical Sciences, on the theme methodology for building a digital twin of a scientific and technical center in the oil and gas industry. Was accepted for defense by the order of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University on the 29th of July 2020, 6941/1. Krasnov Fedor Vladimirovich wrote his thesis at St. Petersburg University. His academic consultant was Doctor of Technical Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Computer Modeling and Multiprocessor Systems of St. Petersburg University, Dekteryov Alexander Borisovich. Number of publications of the applicant which set forth the main points of his study, according to the enclosed list, is 53 in peer-reviewed journals from the list approved by the Ministry of Science and Education of Russian Federation, 24 publications. In journals indexed in the Scientometric databases, Web of Science and Scopus, 20 publications. The applicant submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University a full set of documents to accept his thesis for consideration and defense. All the documents comply with Article 12 of Section 3 of the Order. All the documents submitted by the applicant, according to the information I received from the curator, comply with requirements and are kept in the applicant's attestation file. Copies are available from the officer of the Decision Council Activity Support Department, who is currently present. And I have the thesis over here with me. Before I give the floor to the applicant, do you, dear council members, do you have any general questions to the applicant? And is it necessary to review the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant? No, I see, thank you. Then, let me give the floor, 20 minutes, to the degree of applicant for his summary report. Good afternoon, dear Chairman, dear Council members. I will briefly try to introduce my work, which we started almost 8 years ago, and during this time we've been working is devoted to science efficiency. I remember the time our science was strong and needed no end in memory. That would, in memory of that, we would like to provide solutions that will make our science, help our science move forward. I've been working for Gazprom Neft, STC, so I studied it from the inside as one of the examples of scientific organization which is facing all the typical challenges typical for oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is one of the key industries for our country, and on the other hand is the cycle from scientific cycle from with the first experience and to ultimate testing is very short. But unfortunately, it was clear this complicated applied object has no indicators that could in real time demonstrate the relevance of planned and actual development. So then we started exploring indicators, which models we need to create and how these models should relate to each other, how they can be fine-tuned to. So we got the task to create a digital twin, because these are the most perfect models to describe a description of real objects. A digital twin is a copy of an object and process, and the concept of digital twin is a part of the fourth industrial revolution to help industries and scientific industries to identify problems, to forecast results and produce higher quality products. So a digital twin is a result in my work. Speaking of tasks, which I set myself in this study, so here, first of all, we're talking about methods, results of scientific integral indicators of scientific activity of an STC, choosing models for integral indicators, creating model on the basis of scientific novelty of my study, description of team building, of a detailed algorithm of co-authorship, time dependence of co-authorship, created models for forecasting, models for enlarged view of scientific field of STC on the basis of public data and internal data, created a personnel flow model so-called generation flow, which should be mathematical apparatus for bipartite graph, which is a new thing in this work. Also created a general mathematical model and innovation model. Thus, if we talk about scientific novelty, it lies in complex approach, study to algorithm, integral indicators for modeling on the basis of machine learning algorithm, priority spheres, development of human capital of an enterprise. Research methods, I used theories of computer linguistics as one of the main results of scientific texts. Artificial intelligence, social networks, and its structure should be considered between employees. Information search theories, graphs, machine learning, imitation, modeling, system dynamics, theory of modeling of intellectual processes, and mathematical statistics. We may talk about the two main fields. Is study of external and internal manifestations, which include digital artifacts such as scientific articles, conference materials, information sites, and news about the company. As for internal, in this is modeling of scientific activity, efficiency of production, self-organization of small creative teams, and so, colleagues, let me announce a technical break. We are facing some technical problems. Sound. Dear colleagues, I think we resolved the technical problem that we had. Let's resume our session. Let me continue my speech and let me move on to the challenges and methods for solving them. First of all, speaking of artifact analysis, scientific activity. So here, of course, we to analyze texts, to make some conclusions, to structure them, to classify them, to compare texts, how strategies correspond to. For that, we needed to look at probability text models. The main problem with these models, from the point of application, is that there are no possibilities for fine-tuning these models. The probability text works same for poetry in Kazakh language and for scientific text. So it was necessary to narrow on methods used for some types of scientific articles. The probability of a word. So that was the probability of the next word. There are certain simplifications connected with, and we use Markov chains to make predictions about. Otherwise, it would be hard to predict the next word. Besides, the probability models now became a certain approach, the theme modeling, in which latent lemma identification prevails in the works that have over 30,000 quotes. So this is a very popular field which outshone the other directions of this field, and its main peculiarity is that in distribution for all the texts is only, so here again is not easy to set on a specific type of text. In my opinion, this is a significant drawback. Technical artifacts set fine-tuned to a specific organization, specific theme. Here, on the basis of these problems in my work, I focused on solutions. And at some point I understood that with the help of a two-step or modification algorithm, we can create functionality that would consider parameters, so it will be possible to identify structure for a particular scientific text. So these structures are much more informative than structures used by the other models. So here, together, we were able to demonstrate with my co-authors, with experts from various fields, including oil and gas, and indeed they said this model is highly informative. They understand what is the structure. So we thinning out these matrices and single out the meanings that describe this exact field better than others. So I tried to demonstrate this in this slide, with a very short example. the matrix on the right is different, as I have given here, as I haven't given. And you can see the general words, something about science, something about oil, something about reservoirs, but the structure is not clear. So this structure we put into the optimization method here is one of the matrices. In simple words, entropy. And if we minimize it, then the model is a group of matrices. So these matrices, they have properties, the themes identified with their help, they become specific, coherent, very clear to the experts. This example demonstrates so this is introduction with some general words, and the introduction sometimes does not contain any, and the article can be quite general, so there's no point to analyze it. So the matrix on the right is all the structures which are introduction. It filters them down. So this is a unique opportunity which can be used in various fields and fine-tuned to any sphere, such as physics or medicine, doesn't matter. But we have free parameters, we obtained free parameters that can be used for such, and this was not available before. So and its use in our sphere. So this was for the first time. This is a good tool, useful tool I used in my work. The co-authorship graph. The method is quite old, and the significance of these structures, the nodes, these are people or artifacts, are scientific articles, and the edges, these are connections. From the point of philosophy, it's about connectivism, and the meaning can be conveyed through relations. This is quite a complex philosophical concept, which has its advantages and disadvantages. So I used it as the basis when you built such a graph. The structures in analyzing the graph in this way, you don't have the opportunity to single out content connected. You don't know when this trend started, who started this trend. You don't have the tools to how to maintain this human capital. So the last expert who knew how to do it, who was sick. So and then you, in this case, the methods of attachment, the coefficient of it. So, and I focused on graph clusterization. This opportunity is graph clustering methods enables to identify points where fields of research started. So here is necessary to understand, to go back to such points of. So here, this illustrates the matrix, which combines two components. And here, in the bottom, maybe you can see it very well, but the significance here is that you may see that first the graph still contains some structures, and after some point it starts losing information dramatically. That means that at this point the phase transition occurred when something happened in the organization. So this method can identify key experts, founders, much easier than with the help of organizational methods. Speaking of organizational methods, of course, all the scientific results, all the scientific search is usually dealing with people, but artificial intelligence is the field of the future. So people meet each other, they realize they have something in common, they are interested in the same thing, and they start doing research together. So this scientific organization of 1,000 people, so who can co-author with whom better, and how to make these people acquainted. So that is why focusing is important, and this usually happens with the help of organizational modeling, imitation modeling. It's an experiment, but such experiments often social growth, technical growth. It's necessary to understand why people join teams of research teams. There was no method. So to do this, and I have suggested this method in my work. And this method, I see. So I got carried away, I'm sorry. Let me finish. The digital experiment is the basis of for teamwork that can describe in mathematical terms the model. Maybe compete, but is in a team. I did this with the help of experiments, used necessary results of populations, identified parameters for further modeling. Otherwise, it was impossible. And these parameters became the basis for system dynamics model, which I modeled mathematical processes connected with experts. Some case they are involved in some research projects. It was necessary how to get them involved, not to let them burn out. Such effects as burning out or fatigue are also possible. These are relevant tasks for a scientific research organization. And briefly, I'd like to mention maybe 1 week comparative analysis. Now most successes in cross-national studies, where you apply principles and tools across various sciences. Here, the novelty is that I managed, instead of comparing, I managed to compare without general normalities, because there's a limited number of themes in and you can't define them before you determine their relative values, absolute values. So the organization is focused on shelf research. So so you understand it doesn't have. It's not necessary for it to focus on something else. So it's possible to business intelligence, and business intelligence is also very important in today's world. Speaking of results of implementation, is from the point of awareness, We generated news for them. The system organized regular scoring in some relevant fields, because in these fields we have good potential, and it's very good. It's very easy to do this in the oil industry, and so now we are working with Rostec. Is more difficult. Working with them is more difficult because they don't publish. There are no publications, and still having this method, it's possible. Also, we predicted team burnout in the people feel differently. Optimized project team for scientific and research work to intensify oil recovery at an oil field in Iraq. Of course, this knowledge, this database organized on Gazprom Neft. Has a practical significance as is evidenced with a certain number of works. So here you can see some of the patents I obtained. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. So before we proceed to questions, Sergey Nikolaevich, could you please turn the light on? We can't see you very well. Let us proceed to the next point on our agenda, since all the council members read the thesis, and now you heard the applicant's speech. Do council members have any questions? First, I would like to ask council members if they have any questions regarding the speech. Then let me ask council members working in remote access mode, do you have any questions to the applicant regarding his speech? I think Vladimir Vasilyevich has a question. I have a short question. In your works, I saw you on technological processes of oil and gas complexes. Do you want to create not only a digital twin for an STC, but create a twin connected with some technological processes in the oil and gas complex? Thank you for this question. For such monocities as Dubna, this is a step which is that will be our next. It makes sense to make this our next step, but in an STC we stayed within the framework of organization that determines the strategy, but is not involved in performance. Though of course the next step seems very logical and very natural. Thank you. Do we have more questions? Then I have a question, please. I have two very specific questions regarding your speech. In slide 2, you mention Rostec and Rosatom in one of the squares. Thank you for the question. So here I'm showing the system which has STCs. So we in cross-functional studies and our experiences with Rosatom, we also use them as well as the methods we developed at Skolkovo Technological University. At Skolkovo Technology, we looked at works of Ivan Osilets, then the trainer. Thank you. And one more question. Slide 12. How did you define who's the author? Who was the author? Thank you. An excellent, interesting question. I have a study I have not published yet, and this study is devoted to authorship identification, certain sequence of metadata. There are different roles of people, which is first or second, and in different spheres. For example, in medicine, they are at least given in alphabetical order. In technical sciences, first place is usually given to the person who's responsible for the study, and then the roles could be different, such as guest co-authors. I asked because in physics we do it alphabetically. Yes, I know. And may I have one more question? May I ask? I liked your study very much. You have not mentioned it, but you describe it in detail in your thesis about a hidden negative in academic papers, which is very interesting by itself. Have you applied to the part where you wrote about Landau? You don't have to answer this question. This is it's rhetorical. Since Alexander snatched my question, I will not answer this question. So let's. We are done with this part of our agenda. So now members of the Decision Council have present their reviews. Since all the reviews were published at the Petersburg University website, and moreover, degree applicant has a table. So I suggest to save time, Council members, please focus on the key points only. Don't read the entire review. If you have no objections, let us start. Of course, if anyone wishes to read the entire review, first let's give the floor to Utyashev Alexey Yurievich. It was very interesting for me to read the thesis. It addresses an unusual tasks, the setting is unusual for me, which which alarmed me in the beginning. So will the results be? But then I read it more carefully, and so it was. So this is a scientific paper. So maybe it cannot be applied immediately to our organization. There are some peculiarities, but in principle, formalization of this sphere is a very interesting task, challenging task. And the author of the thesis used several mathematical approaches from different mathematics intense fields, such as the graph theory, Markov chains, and from modern theories such as data science theories. That was interesting. How medium K method, maybe I will ask during discussion how efficient that was. But in general, I have a very positive opinion of the thesis, and in my opinion, it has great potential, and still I have to add some negative points. I have some critical remarks which I would like to read. First, the author uses encoder-decoder method to study two language texts, but the best achievements here with LSTM neuron networks. So I would like the author to explain such choice of methods. May I read all my comments first? The style of the thesis requires improvement and single standard. The division into chapters does not always coincide with priorities, so it's quite bizarre, in my opinion. They're between separate paragraphs. The connection between paragraphs in the same chapter are sometimes not clear, and since the author uses different fields of mathematics, reading was quite hard. 3. Focusing on applied results in the study may have a negative impact on the theoretical significance of the work. The amount of new theorems is not too high, and when explaining conclusions, mostly the engineering hypotheses were tested. And finally, in the digital twin model, the author used optimizing function on the basis of information divergence, but looks only at Kullbach-Leibler entropy, and there's no explanation for this choice. So these are all my comments, which do not reduce the significance of achieved results and overall positive assessment of the thesis. And I think the thesis by Krasnov Fedor Vladimirovich corresponds to the main requirements set by the order, and the author deserves awarding the degree of Doctor in Information Sciences. Thank you. Thank you, Alexei Yurevich. I see that the comments look more or less the same. You may answer all the comments in the end, but it's really up to you. I would like to answer in the end, if that is okay. The next let's give the floor to Alexander Yurevich. Thank you. The theme of the thesis is obviously relevant, and you may have different opinion about this theme, but such tasks, related tasks, were set by the government, by our university, by ministries. So relevance is beyond any doubt. Methods of mathematical modeling, they were quite well explained in the applicant's review and in some discussion already. And so I will not focus too much on that. So I will not focus on this too much. Of course, anyone may have opinions about application of certain methods for research, but certain tasks were set, and the applicant is suggesting ways to solve these problems. You may have different opinion of these methods, but there is some mathematics, theory, methods, and from this point, the thesis is certainly sufficient for awarding the degree. As for the critical remarks, I can read them or just say them. First of all, is insufficient elaboration of the text from the point of its formal structure, some inaccuracies, and it was also visible in the report. You may see the same thing. The applicant during his report, speaking of tasks, sometimes he said, we set ourselves a task, we solve the task. Of course, the tasks are global, so it can only be solved by a team. But I think when presenting a thesis, it makes sense to focus more on the personal contribution of the applicant. My second remark is that the work focuses on a particular sphere, so oil and gas industry, and how should these methods be modified for other theories, how this theory can be transferred to other spheres. And my third question is about the use of recurrent neuron networks. The author uses more or less standard approaches, the use of neuron networks, and more advanced methods have been developed. So to see how these new methods could be used to solve his tasks. But yet the work complies with all the requirements, the results quite well published, and I think the applicant deserves award in the degree. Thank you, Alexander Yurovich. Next review by Adrianov Sergei Nikolaevich. Can you hear me? Well, some things have already been mentioned by my colleagues, so please pay attention. The use of neural networks, it would be interesting to see, for example, the sphere which we call neural networks, and compare from the point of their productivity and efficiency from the point of labor consumption, because such systems explored in this work, they are very heterogeneous. And the tasks where there is no but in this sphere, the main task, in my opinion, is how to put together this variety, not to go beyond the limits of the original task. And the author managed to achieve this with the help of neural networks of various types. This is the first part. And secondly, it seemed to me would be good. I don't see good analysis of approaches connected with text processing. There was a female applicant, so it would be interesting to demonstrate what was used in this work, how it is connected with existing approaches, maybe introduced exactly in this work. So this was the main. So these are my main comments. And uncertainty about the personal contribution. I think that in general the work is, and the task itself look a little bit inappropriate to works defended at our university, at our faculty. But if we overcome these difficulties with information perception, it appears sufficient. The results are very interesting, and I think the author will continue his work in this sphere. I think the customers should be, the results should be in demand, not only in this industry. So I think in general the work corresponds to all the necessary requirements, and I think the work deserves awarding. The author deserves awarding the doctor's degree in this specialty, and a lot of work, good work. Thank you. Next, let's give the floor to Korinkov. Vladimir Vasilovich. Dear colleagues, I agree with the opinion of other council members that the work is highly relevant, very interesting, a complex approach to functioning of STCs. And as we were discussing, we discussed this paper with my colleagues. So is this work dedicated to mathematical modeling of STC or to digital twins? And so here we had different opinions, but I think that this work corresponds to its title. And by my question, I think you can understand that we will see some features of digital twin in the sphere of production, because this sphere is very interesting and it requires that all business processes in oil and gas industry, it's necessary for all these processes to be covered with digital twins. There are many interesting methods, very diverse. So not at once. It took me some time to get used to what I have read, but after a while, from the beginning, I got a positive impression. The amount of mathematical methods and the scope of tasks is very interesting and has great potential. But of course, obviously, though the work has such a positive impression, there are some critical remarks how this work is connected with oil and gas industry. From the text, there are many examples and terms related to oil and gas, but if you look at the tasks, goal and tasks, if you take a look at provisions and results of the work, if you look at the key results, there are 24 points, and oil and gas is not mentioned there at all, though it's included in the title, and the work contains a lot of information about oil and gas, so this small contradiction jumps in the eye. Of course, a lot was done to increase efficiency of STC in oil and gas industry with the help of such developments, but in an open form. The results, the numerical indicators are not very well presented. Let me give you one example, which is very typical. The author makes forecasts for 2018 and says how many publications there will be in 2018. And in the table would be very interesting to inform how true this forecast was. because year 2018 is now gone. So it will be interesting to show the results, to see how accurate our forecasts are. From the point of other comments, I agree that, of course, this work was performed by a group of authors. It would make sense to emphasize the contribution of the author. That comment has already been given. My other critical remarks apply mostly to formatting and text presentation. The material could be structured differently, and maybe sometimes the spelling, the results, the structure, so better structure would be instrumental and useful here. And I have some comments regarding editing. The drawings are not very good, so sometimes it's very hard to figure them out. And the glossary of terms would also be useful for many. This sphere was new, so a good glossary of the used terms would be very useful. But the glossary only contains 9 terms, and that number seems too little. There was also a list of abbreviations, but many terms for somebody not familiar with the industry would be very useful. So it would be good to have them at hand in the text of the thesis. So most of my remarks apply to formatting. But despite these critical remarks, I think this is a very high-quality work. The research was very useful, and well, practical significance, theoretical significance is beyond any doubt. And I think that Fedor Vladimirovich deserves being awarded the degree of Doctor of Technical Sciences, specialty 051301. Next, let's give the floor to Klementov Sergei Anatolievich. Good afternoon. I will try not to repeat what was already said by my colleagues. So here's what I would like to say. Fedor Vladimirovich sets himself a global task to assess efficiency. This issue existed for thousands of years, and I think from a philosophical point to proceed to specific tasks, how research conducted at a research organization, the methodology of digital twin creation, co-authorship graphs. I liked the part dedicated to themes. So 8 years in oil and gas industry, and the conclusion is that either the themes are hidden because there's no one single topic. Analysis of bilingual texts. This is also very relevant and very well presented in the thesis. Efficiency of a researcher or a team. So here I'd like to proceed to the speech, because some members of the Dissertation Council and myself, we are right now involved in an application for grants, and some cases where the author for 5 years, every year, publishes a paper. This is not elementary physics, elementary particle physics. The scope is, and the number of co-authors is over 1,000. And then, is this a genius, or the fabric is a factory of papers? So we start reading these papers. Some are very fundamental. applied to very specific cases. That is why I could not avoid this question, Fedor Vladimirovich, why this method was used, but this is always, so this is a matter of taste, of course. But it seems to me that the thesis has scientific and practical significance. It seems to me that the author demonstrated how it could be applied for STCs in oil and gas industry. And beyond any doubt, I think the Fedor Vladimirovich deserves awarding the degree of Doctor of Technical Sciences, and I support this decision. Thank you, Alexey Anatolyevich. Now it's time for me to present my review, but since everything has already been said, I will limit myself to critical remarks. I actually liked the work very much because I ran into this problem myself approximately 25 years ago when I became deputy chairman of Informatics Council of our vice prime minister. So I had to identify working teams who's doing what, who's doing better, who's doing not so well. As I understood, this is something we need. And during the entire discussion of this work, I supported Fedor Vladimirovich, and yet to show that I have read his work, I'd like to give a couple of critical remarks. First critical remark was mentioned by everybody. When I saw the list of methods used, I was surprised why for oil and gas industry is not about that. And my second critical remark maybe applies more to something more specific with which I had to deal myself. I was very interested with this passage about graph method, organization of teamwork with documents. Graph approach excludes feedback, of the use of feedback for document correction, and yet in the activity the question of feedback is very important. So it will be interesting for me to understand how such approach to teamwork is justified and what are its limitations. And yet I think these remarks do not reduce the advantages of the thesis, and the thesis corresponds to all the requirements set by the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the degree applicant deserves awarding degree of Doctor of Sciences in Informatics. Now we have the opportunity to hear the applicant's answers to all the questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear council members, for your in-depth analysis of my work. Very touched that you understood the meaning I tried to convey with my work, and most of your comments, except for the comments about the regarding formatting, I will try, which of course I certainly accept. I would like to improve. And as for your comments about application of oil and gas complex, to some extent, this is because I was involved in this work. I worked at an STC, being already an expert of the Federal Science Development Center, and in grant distribution, I had to deal with the same problems. So I wanted to identify mechanisms that affect in short-term decision-making at scientific organizations. So I decided to connect my study with oil and gas STC, because in STC where I worked is, on the one hand, is a very open organization, international. It's possible to compare English and Russian texts, and is developing globally. The study that I conducted on the English texts, certain problems of identification, for example, that some articles in Russian translated with the help of machine, with the help of online translators, and so the quality is such was the key to my choice of methods. And there was a general question which I heard about the methods I used with neural networks, neural structures. I developed the following approach. First of all, in my study, it was explainability was important for me, and now I see that methods explained by artificial intelligence, they are getting more popularity in the scientific environment, and the marketing methods used more and more complex neural structures. Every year use GPT-3. I took a close look at them, and it seems that though a lot of money now is spent on $17 million spent on GPT-3 training, so that's quite a lot of money, which I didn't have such money available, but my methods, I wanted them to be explainable, and wanted them to explain, make full tracing why this or that decision was made. Because when a neural network trained somewhere in the West takes part as a full member of a board of directors, this why American artificial intelligence is giving us advice on what to do. So at some point this structure is no longer acceptable. So the methods introduced by Sukhoi, Rostec, a number of Rosatom companies is unacceptable. The use of intelligence developed abroad, and as methodologies which our scientists have been developing. So I tried to use wherever possible, only where national developments, and my students and my St. Petersburg School of Science, I try first of all to see this, and then if necessary, I start using works by Western scientists, which of course are much easier to find. But here I'd like to share a personal observation, which hopefully you will be familiar, that very often I see that Western researchers, as a rebranding of developments conducted in Russia, research in Russia. Then in Russia, 10 years ago, the method has a different name. It's got a different name as a method developed by Zhuravlov, quoted with somebody else's name. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Do you, dear council members, are you satisfied with the applicant's answers? Yes. Thank you. Then let us move on. And Natalia Vladimirovna, is anyone present willing to speak? Then have we received the questions online? No. Then so we can move forward. scientific consultant of the applicant is present. Since we discussed the work in detail already, I would like Alexander Borisovich to talk only about the applicant. Thank you. I will try to be very brief. And what I would like to say, Fedor Vladimirovich, I would like to say a couple of very warm words, because besides being a very competent scientist who has worked in many organizations, who can unveil very serious scientific problems, he is a very good leader of supervisor of his students, because during the period we've been working together in this field, he has demonstrated his ability to be a very interesting researcher who can motivate his students really well. And many students got motivated, and they published articles, co-authored articles with him. So I think I liked very much that colleague Klementov mentioned. He managed in this work from a philosophical point to proceed to a mathematical approach. So maybe this is one of the main features of characteristics of capacities of Fedor Vladimirovich to proceed from a description of a hard to formalize content to its formal structure and getting some specific results. I am very happy that Fyodor Vladimirovich discussing his thesis at our university, and I hope that to this dissertation council, and I hope it will be supported by all the council members. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander Borisovich. Since 3 council members are working in remote access mode, I have to ask them if they have any questions regarding the procedure of this session. The report materials presented? No. No, everything is perfect. Then we have 2 options before we proceed to the open voting, and in accordance with our requirements, we have to, our voting has to be open. We may take a break and ask all the attendees leave the room, but do we need any private discussion? No, we don't. Very well. Then we will not have a private discussion, and let me proceed to let me ask individual council members about the results of today's session. Each council member in turn has to give his opinion for awarding the degree, and so that has to be, the procedure has to be. Council member Uteshev Alexei Yurievich. I am for awarding the degree to Krasnov Fyodor Vladimirovich, the degree of Doctor of Technical Sciences in given specialty. Council member Alexander Yurievich. I am for awarding the degree. Thank you. Council member Andriyanov Sergei Nikolaevich. I am for awarding the degree. Thank you. Council member Korenkov Vladimir Vasilyevich. I am for awarding the degree. Council member Klementov Alexei Anatolovich. I am for awarding the degree. And me, as a chairman, Bogdanov Alexander Vladimirovich, I have no option but to support the decision awarding the degree. Thus, out of 6 council members present, 6 members voted for, and no one voted against, and awarding the degree, no one abstained. The decision to award to Krasnov Fedor Vladimirovich degree of Doctor of Science in Information Technology, Specialty 051301, System Analysis, Management and Information Processing, has been made. Dear colleagues, Since our session is held with some members, council members work in remote access mode, do you, dear council members or degree applicant and other attendees, any questions regarding the procedure of today's session? No. We have the opportunity to closing remarks of the applicant. Not final, but closing. In my closing remarks, I would like to thank the chairman of the council and members of the council for the time you devoted to my work, such detailed analysis. Also, I would like to thank my consultant, Alexander Borisovich Diktarov, with whom we've been working together to improve the results of my study. All this work, Nadezhda Lvovna Shogaleva, with whom she gave me valuable advice, and my daughter, who's present here, and my family, my wife, for bearing with me during these 8 years where I spent all evenings at work or at my computer to perform this research which I presented and of which our country will benefit. Thank you. Now, to finish our session, on behalf of all the council members, on behalf of those working, I would like to congratulate degree applicant. Thank you. And I declare our session closed. Thank you.